Yesterday, I shot a short film with a director that I've never worked with. I wanted to take you along in this behind-the-scenes video to give you some insight on how we executed this one-day shoot. This was a very last-minute project. The director, I met him 2 days before the shoot. Luckily, he had done a lot of pre-production already, so he gave me a very detailed shot list. He even gave me a reference video of what the final video would look like using animations. And he also gave me the script. Because it was so last minute, I'm glad we were able to meet in person, get a sense of how he likes to work, but also to get aligned with the vision so that we could execute in the most efficient and effective way when it came shooting day. We scouted the apartment location, which was the second location, and this short film had a total of 2 locations. This project was interesting because he wanted everything to be in slow motion, and ideally 100 frames per second. I rarely shoot in slow motion. The most I will typically go is 48 frames per second. Knowing that this final product would mostly be slowed down at least 4x, it affected some planning. Initially, we wanted to use the Ursa Mini Pro, but in order to get that high frame rate, we ended up using my Blackmagic 6K Pro. When using the 6K Pro in 120 frames per second, the sensor gets cropped dramatically because it ends up being in 2.8K. Looking at Blackmagic's documentation, the crop factor is actually 3.3x. So for lensing, we plan to use 35mm and 50mm, but in the end, we ended up using my 11 to 16mm zoom for, I would say, 80% of the shots. For the remaining shots, we used the 35mm f2.0. The day before the shoot, he messaged me saying our actors backed out last minute, but luckily he was able to reach out to an agency and find a female actress model and a child actor model the night before the shoot. Luckily, everything worked out in the end. The day of the shoot, I met up with the director Arthur at 8 a.m. near his apartment, and we transferred all of the equipment into his car to go to the first location, which was Ava Air headquarters. Ava Air headquarters has quite strict security, which is why we had to go in the same car. His license plate was already registered and they gave me a security badge. But backtracking a bit to the equipment, having scouted the apartment 2 days prior, knowing that we had no budget for any other crew, it was just going to be the director and me as the DP, I wanted to prepare enough equipment to light the scenes, knowing that we would be shooting in such a high frame rate, we would need more light than usual. But at the same time, we wanted to balance the fact that we only had 2 people in the production crew, and we didn't want too much equipment slowing us down, especially when transferring from the first location to the second location. So the night before, I already sent him the equipment list, so we were aligned with what equipment we would be bringing. I divided it into 3 categories: the camera equipment, the lighting equipment, and the grip equipment. And I'm thinking for a future video, a topic around how cinematographers spend their budget, and I can go into more detail if you're interested. Leave a comment below and I'll be sure to make that video and talk a little bit more about how we prepare the equipment and do the budgeting. So we drove to the first location. It was very easygoing. In terms of lighting, I stuck to 2 lights. I had a key light that I placed as a far side key. For these scenes, we had 3 to 4 actors per shot. Luckily, the location actually had quite a bit of overhead lighting already. There were people working while we were filming, so we couldn't completely control the overhead lighting, so I simply augmented it with a Forza 300 and a grid, and then I added a 4-foot or 120cm tube as a hair rim light. I wanted to share with you some of the footage because I'm actually really curious. Such a severe crop of 3.3. We mostly shot at ISO 1250 to keep the noise at a minimum, because I know when you crop into the 6K sensor, it makes the noise even more visible. Shooting in a high frame rate, a new experience for me, as I mentioned. It introduced some new problems in terms of flicker. Now, I've dealt with flicker a lot in the past, but more for just the standard 24 frames per second. What I've seen people do internationally is they will change the shutter angle from 180 degrees to 172.8 degrees, and normally that will fix things when you're shooting in European countries versus American countries versus Asia. However, that did not do the trick on this shoot, so I had to play with the shutter angle quite a bit.
That's good.
Also knew in the back of my mind, I told Arthur that if there was any flicker In the post-production process, you can use Deflicker and DaVinci Resolve, which I've used with great success in the past. So this first location, we wrapped it in about 2 hours. And then we went to the second location, which was much more involved because it was an apartment where we had a living room, we had a scene in the bathroom, we had a scene in an office, and a scene in a bedroom. Luckily, that went pretty smoothly as well. In some of these behind-the-scenes clips, I grabbed with the Insta360 X4 just to kind of show you guys what was going on during the shoot. Because the space was much more small, I stuck mostly to a smaller softbox with the Forza 60, and that was enough for the most part because this wasn't going to be too high key, and luckily Arthur, the director, was pretty open to me doing more moody and more darker type scenes. So we kept the lighting pretty simple to work in these smaller spaces. The 2 tubes that I brought were invaluable, versatile to fit in tight spaces. I don't want to go too much into the storyline, but it's basically about pilots and about how important safety is for flying, and it kind of ties it to a family aspect to make it a little bit more personal and relatable, because we wanted to make use of the mirror, but because of that it was hard for us to light it. And in these situations, luckily this apartment had a lot of lighting controls. In the bathroom, for example, there were 3 to 4 different switches, so we could really tweak, just play with the lights. And that's usually what I do before I even introduce any new lights. I kind of see what I can do with the existing light. From there we moved into the office scene, and that's where we shot the widest shot of this piece. We had to go to 6K. Arthur wanted to shoot it at a Dutch angle, and if I'm able to get the files off of my CFast card, I will show you, but because he created a folder in my CFast card, I'm unable to open it in my Windows computer, so I'm going to need to get a hold of an Apple machine to get these files and to play with them. In the apartment, I did more handheld movement. We've shot the pilot in his office, we shot him in the bedroom waking up to an alarm, and then the actress and the actor arrived, and the final scenes were all shot in the living room. In the living room, we messed with the lighting quite a bit, but at one point we used all 5 of the lights that I brought. The main point of this video is I want to show you what a typical day of work is like in Taiwan as a DP. And I know one of my first uploaded videos on this YouTube channel was more for a corporate shoot where we had 5-person crew for interviews. And this project was different in a many number of ways, but for one, it was a skeleton crew. It was just 2 of us, which I see as the trend in the industry right now. In the past in my career, I kind of wanted to work myself up to higher quality productions where you eventually need more and more crew and more talent and everything. But from what I've seen this past year, and the trend is budgets are getting smaller, production sizes are getting smaller. So this was a good exercise for me to act not as the DP, but also as the gaffer. And I told Arthur from the get-go that this would be way better if we had someone doing the lighting so that we could be more focused on our work at hand. Arthur was pleased with the images that we made. I also had a positive experience working with a director that I've never worked with before. All in all, it was a win-win. In terms of post-production, he has someone in Thailand who's going to be doing the editing, someone in Hollywood doing the voiceover. How exciting it is that each film project is so different. That's why I love this job, and I'll continue to do it. Again, I would have loved to use the Ursa Mini Pro, but I think the 6K Pro worked out better because I knew we wouldn't have a gaffer, and with the high frame rate, I know lighting would be an issue, and the dual native ISO of the 6K Pro definitely helped us. The Ursa, I think, would have caused more problems. Of course, the image would have been better, but we know the deliverable for this is only going to be 1080p. The aspect ratio will be 2.39 to 1. I hope you learned something from this video. If you'd like to see a future video more about the gear breakdown and the logic and processes behind that, please leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.